Hello everyone. Thank you for joining to listen our discussion here with Mr. Aivar Paul. My name is Taavi Tamkivi, and I'm going to discuss about many different things which relate to crime fighting, anti-money laundering, fighting against those things. Just to start with, I want to introduce myself first. As I said, my name is Taavi. I've been fighting different financial crime for the last 15 years, like first in Skype, where I was running anti-fraud team, which was stopping credit card fraud, account takeovers, scam, spam, different things. And then I joined the TransferWise, or which is called the Wise in these days. And I was building up AML sanction fraud teams and products over there. And now over the last 4 years, I've been building my own company called Salv, which is producing products for AML products for different financial institutions, including banks, fintechs, crypto companies, and so on. And I'm happy to introduce also Aivar Paul, who has been like a working partner for me for many years. Aivar has been filling really different roles. First, he was like running CEO of Estonian FIU, which was like super interesting role, which I hope Aivar can explain later a bit more his experience. Then he was leading AML at LHV, which is the most ambitious and most fastest growing Estonian bank, and which is based also in UK right now. And then running AML function over there, I think it provided really good experience. And now he's working as an independent AML crime fighting consultant here in our region. Okay, but what we're going to discuss about today, there are mainly three things that I wanted to cover. Like one is just to talk about the current financial crime as we see it. Like what are the trends, why we speak about this in these days so much, what is the future of the crime. So that's like one interesting area where we would like to dig into. Second is actually like what are the industry-wide responses to this crime. We as experts, we have heard and we know a lot about the transaction monitoring and sanction screening and risk assessment, which are pretty much the classical things, but also becoming more and more complex in these days. But what are the other trends and what are like information exchange or intelligence exchange between the private to private and private to public sector has been really hot topic over the last year. So let's focus a bit on these areas. And lastly, we want to share with you the experience, one initiative which was kicked off in Estonia a couple of years ago, which is called AML Bridge, which is now expanding across the Europe, and which is one of the solutions how data exchange between the private sector happens, and what are the challenges when setting it up, and what are the opportunities of this kind of technologies. So that's the third topic that we would like to discuss today. Okay, but let's cover first like why we are here and what is the problem that we are discussing here and what we're trying to resolve actually. The problem is that financial crime is on rise, and like when I was saying financial crime, then actually that's like money that's been made from the different horrific crimes like drug trafficking, human trafficking, illegal weapon trading, bribery, like funding the wars and stuff. So that's generating huge amount of money, cash, which is then being laundered. And this money is also sometimes stolen from the customers of the banks. So it's not about like white collar financial crime as some people might think about. But like what is changing and what are the key drivers for the change? What I see, and then maybe Aivar, you can help to expand that view as well. Over the last like a couple of years, there are like three major influencers which are causing the increase of the financial crime and which are also making it harder to catch this crime. So like one is COVID pandemic, which was opening people's mind and the wallets to different bank accounts to different types of the fraud, like investment scam, like a love scam, where people were voluntarily sending their funds to criminals or giving access to their accounts in the criminals. And here in Europe, like many like banks are in super difficult situation, which this kind of fraud is causing to their customers and themselves. So that's one of the like drivers behind the trend. The other one, of course, is the war itself, which is going on in Ukraine right now, and that's like almost the only weapon that like West has. Non-lethal weapon is the sanctions, like new sanction regimes or packages which are being signed off. In these days, it's getting harder and harder to write out of new sanction lists and packages. That's one thing which is coming out from the political level. But other is like how effectively a financial sector is able to apply those sanctions on their customers and their transactions. And not only financial sector, but actually other parts of the industry as well, how successfully they're actually following those and what are their tools and products, technologies that they can use to follow the guidance of the governments. And the third trend, arguments behind the trend is actually the financial technology revolution, which has been happening for the last 10 years, maybe a bit less. And like all the new instant payments or faster payment technologies, API integrations, PSD2, e-wallets, cryptocurrencies. So we as consumers and entrepreneurs really love these technologies, but also criminals also do love these technologies because these help to hide their stolen proceeds, to move money faster through the financial sector. And also these new areas are clearly weaknesses of the older financial institutions who don't have a good, strong protection against those. So that's my view, or these three arguments which I've seen over the last couple of years. But Aivar, you have been in this industry for much longer and have been hands-on resolving and investigating and preventing these kind of challenges. So maybe you have a bit longer view of things. What else, or what's the true impact of these kind of arguments that you see that have impact on the financial crime right now?
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree what you have said, that there are quite big changes in the world affecting also the criminals and criminal activity. So definitely sanctions and war and sanctions related topics, and it's actually has different sides, because we can see that of course Russians, sanctioned persons and not sanctioned persons, trying to funnel their assets to the Europe. So it could be just pure simple case where somebody is trying to protect their assets, which are, how to say, melting in Russia, or the government wants to take those assets over, or those could be oligarchs hiding their assets. So definitely the sanctions part is very, very important, and I think that it will be maybe even the #1 topic for the next years, to understand who is transferring money and who is behind the money, both in the fiat money world and also in cryptocurrencies as well.
So just sorry to interrupt, but just on this topic, it's my feeling is, or understanding is, that in addition to governments who are writing out the new sanction packages, the public opinion is also now changing to that. Okay, we understand why these sanctions are applied on oligarchs or politicians, and this seems to be a new mental level in our society, which wasn't maybe here 4 months ago, when sanctions were touching only people coming from very third world countries, which were far away from us, and we didn't, as newspaper readers, we didn't feel that how these sanctions could benefit our society. But now there is a feeling, and secondly, there is also better understanding in the financial sector as well, that it creates more work for the people, but also people truly see what is the benefit of these sanctions, which wasn't here. Do you agree with these kind of changes?
Yeah, I fully agree. Of course, the Russian invasion started already in 2014, and actually the first sanctions were implemented then, but then it was not in the scale comparable to today's sanctions, so it's a little bit different. And I would say that first time regular citizen of EU sees and understands what are the sanctions and why we need those sanctions. And I personally like that many companies and private persons also have applied their own moral sanctions, so not buying certain goods or goods originated from Russia or anything like that. So companies withdrawing their businesses from Russia, not related directly to sanctions. It's the moral sanctions. So definitely it has changed a lot. Of course, I think that Belarusian sanctions are for 10 and more years there already, but as they were quite low scale, they didn't affect us directly. So I would say even maybe the banking sector wasn't very, how to say, not enthusiastic is not the best word, but it didn't seem as a huge thing comparing to today's situation, because you clearly understand that people are dying and sanctions are there to stop, at least try to stop or mitigate those horrific actions. Even, of course, we can understand that sanctions will not stop the war as one tool, but it is very important tool that we limit aggressors and we limit their capabilities to build new things to bomb people or harm in any other way. So, and it's unfortunately, the war, the most awful thing we could imagine, helped a lot also not only the financial industry, but everybody to understand what are the sanctions and why we need those.
Mm-hmm. So we touched on the sanctions, which is clearly a topic in itself and bigger topic. But what else do you see happening in this?
Of course, you mentioned already cyber fraud, not maybe mentioning cyber fraud directly, but last 2 years or 2.5 years, mostly starting after the COVID, the cyber fraud is growing very, very rapidly. And we can imagine that there are quite many different reasons. Of course, the COVID itself opens up new potential criminal activities to selling fake products, not correctly, how to say, produced masks, for example, and trying to scam people to buy those, or selling masks but not actually sending them, and so on. But also different kind of governmental support, money-related scams. It's not so how to say, visible problem in Estonia, because we don't have a lot of specific support programs, but for example in UK it's huge issue, and also in United States and in many other countries. But also I would say that regular criminals who used to defraud or scam or even rob people to get their living, now they were facing the problem that people are sitting at home. It was very difficult to scam people in how to say, in regular way. So they have to turn to the new methodologies, and one they found was to try to find different victims through the internet. Of course, it was there already before that, but it has skyrocketed in 2 years.
About sanctions, cyber fraud, what else do you see happening here?
One thing you didn't mention, and it's also a little bit related to war, but it actually started already previously before war, and this spring, and also before the COVID, is illegal immigration and refugees. So I think a lot of money is made and has been made before those things already on illegal immigration, and then we have seen a lot of money, not in Estonia directly, but in the banking sector. That it's quite good source of obtaining criminal funds, and I would say that if you look at the EU level trends, then illegal immigration and human trafficking is potentially one of the biggest issues there. So yeah, it depends what kind of white papers or similar you read, and is it more related to cyber fraud, or is it more related to illegal immigration and human trafficking? Then yeah, it's even hard to say which is bigger issue. Mm-hmm. And we can imagine that with current situation where the people are fleeing from the Ukraine to protect themselves, mm-hmm. but of course there are also people who want to just leave the country and and not actually leaving because it's war happening, and also the people trying to leave Russia in the same way, that people are not happy with the government, they don't want to live there anymore, but also there are potential people who just trying to find a better way of living somewhere else. And we could only imagine what will happen if the one of the dark forecasts that there will be quite a huge problem with food, especially in African countries, then it can boost once again illegal immigration from the African countries also to Europe to basically from their perspective to survive. But from how to say criminal perspective, it's quite good source of scamming those people and taking a lot of money to transport them and so on.
So it's like even before the war, like there were waves of refugees coming from Africa, different regions, countries where in Africa there is a war going on, but also some other countries. And to get the ticket from Africa to Europe, you had to pay something to the people who were transporting you. Was it like in thousands of euros?
Thousands of euros, yeah. It depends, of course, always. But and we can remember that it can be also be political manipulation tool as well, as Belarus was using it against Lithuania and Poland, or actually against the EU. After the riots and after the elections in Belarus. So I think it has been quite dominantly here for a couple of, I would say even up to 5 years already. And I think that probably it will be growing issue, not a fading issue.
True, and like we can do simple calculations that if the people who are selling tickets to the free world, if they make 5,000 euros per person, and if there are like 10,000 people being transported, they have lots of probably cash, and this cash has to be laundered somehow throughout the financial system, and the like, owners of this trading network will make it back as a villas and luxury yachts and cars.
And unfortunately, it's not 10,000s; it's potentially millions and tens of millions.
Okay, thank you. These are the like 3-4 key changes or key drivers for the increasing financial crime that you see.
Maybe I would comment also on the not the criminal part, but also the environment part. That the same you mentioned, PSD2 and other initiatives and growing fintech sector. So I think it is game changer because, and it has been already sometimes, but it will be very important to how to say follow the trend, and especially from the crime fighting perspective, and especially from the state's perspective, how to understand the trend, how it affects also the investigation of criminal cases, but especially how to gather intelligence, because 10 years ago and before that, it was quite easy. You had, let's say roughly, we have 10 banks in Estonia, let's say 4 or 5 bigger banks. If you wanted to know where the person is operating with their money, you send out 5, 6, maybe 10 letters, you get the answer. Of course, there are money mules, frontmans used, and so it's not so easy, but still it was quite easy to, you knew that there is something like 4 or 5 potential banks where the person can help the money, maybe in neighboring countries as well, but still limited number of banks. But now the picture is completely changed. So my friends are not criminals, using different fintech company products. Myself, I'm using some of them. There is so many different options there. So people are investing in cryptocurrency, so they have wallets, maybe usually related to bigger exchanges, but not only. There is different options there. People are using different payment methods. I have friends using Revolut. There is N26 and many other. I call them neobanks. So it's bank-like service. And also there are many different payment institutions. So now to gather the intelligence, what are person's financial interests, it's very, very difficult. So if you try to gather intelligence and later to investigate criminal cases, so it's I would say not maybe nightmare, but it is very, very difficult for investigators.
So it's basically the network of financial players in the market has, like, it's not doubled, but maybe increased tenfold if you include all the small newcomers.
I would even say that it is it's not tenfold, it's 100+ fold, because the question is that we are not using just like Latvian and Finnish banks now, but we can use Irish, German, UK financial institution services. So I can use, I don't know, Coinbase as wallet, which is operating under the in EU under the Irish license, and then I use Revolut, which is under the Lithuanian license, and so on. So it's not even tenfold. So there are so many options, not mentioning the virtual asset service providers, which are maybe not how to say registered nowhere. So there are so many options where you can keep your money and operate and transact, and so it's even limitless. I would say already. I remember from UK National Risk Assessment. Not the UK National Risk Assessment, but the UK last FATF assessment. And if I remember correctly, then in that report was mentioned that there are roughly 17,000 financial institutions which should be in one or other way supervised. So it's only UK, so 17,000 potential places where a person can have their assets in one or other way and transact through those, and that's just UK. So yeah.
But this is like actually the data point that, okay, in UK only there might be 17,000 financial institutions or similar who
3 years ago,
who had to be reviewed. That introduces like one of the risks that there is a huge amount of different ways and paths that criminal can use today, not only technologies themselves, but actually different institutions that they can use. And criminals are forming networks, or they're using like financial networks to launder the money through the system, maybe much faster and with a much higher success rate than ever before. And at the same time, financial institutions themselves, maybe they're getting better with exchanging funds between themselves. Like your former employer LHV is doing it greatly, the instant payments. There are many other like neobanks or like providers who are offering financial technologies, financial services to other institutions in the market. So this is like progressing quite well, the way how financial institutions interact with each other about like moving funds and assets between them. But at the same time, there is a clear problem that the same institutions are not very good in exchanging data about possible financial crime, about suspicious customers, about dodgy bank accounts, which could help to stop these criminal networks. So over the last couple of years, there is a saying which I really like, that it takes a network to stop the network, or it takes a network to beat the network of financial criminals. And there are some interesting changes in that space, but also many problems happening, or like many things that are slowing down the change and evolution around the data exchange between the private sector and private to public sector, like security risks, privacy risks. Criminals are working in the networks, but financial institutions are struggling still to do that, namely to exchange financial fincrime information between themselves. So maybe you can explain how do you see that this kind of intelligence sharing could offer a solution or part of the solution for the crime fighters?
Yeah, let's take where are the problems currently in fighting financial crime, so both from the private sector but also from the state side. So the biggest issue is that the same before mentioned how to say diversification of funds between different very different institutions, credit institutions, payment institutions, virtual asset service providers, so on. So the intelligence gathering is very difficult, and especially if you are an investigator in Estonia trying to investigate, or investigator in Germany or the UK, and you are facing the fact that you have suspect, and the person has I don't know, let's say Revolut account in Lithuania. So you need to have now official request to Lithuania to get the information, and still that problem is still there, that such kind of cooperation is still very slow. So if I'm as criminal using instant payment can transfer my money today to Lithuania, same day from Lithuania to Germany, same day from Germany to Ireland, and it takes me maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes even, and maybe less, to follow the same money route through official rogatory letters to get the information for the investigation. It potentially, as there was mentioned, 4 countries, I would predict that obtaining that information will take 6 till 12 months. So, and it's just 15 minutes action from the criminal point of view. So it's one thing is very important, that there has to be mechanism in place if you really want to fight criminals and financial crime. There have to be mechanisms in place to exchange the information better, and same applies to in a little bit different angle also to the private sector. So currently, you have incoming funds coming from other bank. You have questions, suspicious there. So it's very, how to say, difficult to ask from other banks their view on the customer and transaction, and not mentioning that it's I would say even impossible to go next step. So to say the same example, that if to customer in having bank account in Estonia, there was a transaction from Germany, for example, of course that there can be made a request of information to the German bank from Estonian bank. I would predict that this response will be quite limited and maybe related only to KSE information maximum, but there will be no way to ask from that German bank where the money came from, and go to the next step before that. So I think if you really want to change the way we are trying to address our higher risk customers and transactions, then this information exchange has to be improved quite a lot.
That's super clear also for me, to enable financial crime fighters to communicate with each other. It doesn't matter if they're like in the private sector or public sector. Just for the wider background, we have seen actually over the last many years some initiatives or lots of talks actually from the FATF side. I think it was back in 2017 when they wrote out first set of recommendations, how if and how data should be exchanged, fincrime data should be exchanged in the private sector and with the public sector. And in European directives, there are some hints or directives to that as well. We have seen many country-specific initiatives, like FCA in UK was running a hackathon or like innovation hub a few years ago to come up with the PET technologies, privacy enhancing technologies, to enable banks to exchange data. There is like in the Netherlands, there is TMNL project, which is meant to bring come up with joint transaction monitoring. In Sweden, there is Invidem, KYC utility provider. We have heard stories from Australia, from Singapore, from Poland, from other countries. So there are a lot of talks and a lot of initiatives going on. what are the other things which might hold back the banks themselves actually? Why are not, as you were quite recently working inside of the bank, like I know that your bank was really innovative in that sense, but like maybe you can explain the things that you see are holding back private sector institutions from this data exchange, and maybe also public sector as well, like why it's not happening, although there seems to be quite strong push towards that.
I think there are, it's combination of many things. One thing is how to say behavior or behavioral reason that if you haven't done something, then you need to change something to act differently. So of course there is obvious how to say good benefits to do that, but still you have to change the behavior. It's maybe a small thing, but it's still I think one reason there. Second thing is uncertainty on regulations as well, because last year's quite prominent topic in Europe beside AML is data protection. So all the privacy, although people are posting everything about their lives in TikTok, Instagram and Facebook, but still the governments want to protect their citizens as much as possible. And I think sometimes it goes over some common sense borders from my perspective. But I'm not saying that banks are afraid to exchange information, but it was unclear in which format, which way it could be done. And in Estonia, we had also discussion with the regulator as well, that we need clearer, our banking sector understanding was that we need clearer instruction how to do that, because there is provision in the law that banks can exchange the information, but it doesn't clarify the extent, content, how it should be done. And banks actually asked the Ministry of Finance to clarify those things and maybe release some sort of regulation to explain and guide the banking sector towards that. But the regulator wasn't, how to say, the regulator didn't take that initiative very well, and they said that it's up to you. So we are allowing you to do, it's up to you to now think of how to do that. And I actually, then I was a little bit frustrated that the Minister of Finance didn't want to help us. But actually later I was quite happy with that reason, because if it would be regulated by the Ministry of Finance, then it could be, I think it could be more limiting than it is today. So today we can explore different things, and if we do it in open and transparent way, and we include also the regulator and supervisor and then maybe FIU among that, or include them in those discussions, then actually we don't have limits currently, I would say. So it's just understanding how far we can go. And maybe the third thing, maybe holding a little bit back banks, is that everything related to money laundering suspicious usually is like it's covered like big secrecy. Even inside the bank, nobody should know, only the person who has suspicious and the AML department and maybe some other persons as well. But it usually has been covered with the big blanket that nobody doesn't see under the blanket what is happening there. But now the idea that I will even send the information outside of my house, and it's not the FIU, but it's other bank. So and the question is, of course, that even today we can't send suspicious activity information to other bank. But the question is that we have to change our mindset, that we are not sending with that request about our customer or transaction to other bank. It's not breaching the banking secrecy, it's clear, but also we are not breaching the tipping off provisions from the AML law, but it is actually exchanging information about the customer, about the transaction to get clearer understanding about the circumstances, and it's not tipping off. It has been, how to say, the understanding what is allowed and what we can do I think has changed lately.
So just to summarize, like there are three things in your mind which are actually slowing this progress down. It's like one is that change in the working procedures that is needed for the banks to make data exchange happen, because like someone has to gather the information, send it, get response, answer, process, do something. That's one thing. The other is that the regulatory guidance or clearance, not hard laws, but actually just supportive approach by the regulators to encourage banks to do something new, differently, and like reducing the risk of not doing things right. And the third is that the current like procedural and legal environment sometimes might hold back consciously because of the secrecy that needs to be kept around the criminal cases. Just to move on, luckily we have one really successful like program running here very close to us, which is probably the first in the world fastest growing data exchange network, which was initiated in Estonia back in 2020 already. It was launched in 2021, and now in this year there are already first international messages, information being exchanged. It's called AML Bridge, which was built by the Estonian banks, the banking community, which was supported and advised by the local regulators, our FSA, FCA, FIU, and then the Data Protection Inspectorate as well. And now, as it's working really well for the banks, the people, crime fighters in the banks are happy with this data exchange platform. Regulators are happy and proud that the banking sector did something new. And now we're expanding it into other countries across the Baltics, into UK, some other countries in Europe as well are picking it up. So let's focus on the AML Bridge a bit more. Just briefly summarize what this AML Bridge does. It's a technology platform, technically secure, encrypted messaging, which allows members, like member financial institutions, to exchange different types of information about their potential financial crime, which they're seeing or which they're trying to prevent. It covers fraud, it covers sanctions, it covers transaction monitoring, AML investigations, and then the number of different data points and use cases is increasing. It was founded by the 4 Estonian banks, LHV, Luminor, Swedbank, and SEB. By now it has grown a countrywide initiative like where all the local Estonian banks are joined, also like many fintechs, many different regulated companies that are exchanging thousands of messages or like investigation cases between themselves already. People who are using it, they claim that the quality of their work has gone up, the speed of their work has gone up like 10 or 20 times. They're actually able to save more money for their customers. If you talk about different cyber fraud, then a lot of this money is saved thanks to this AML Bridge platform, and they are now calling their other colleagues from other countries to join as well. Maybe you can explain like what motivated, as LHV and you personally was one of the founding members of this initially trial or test, and we didn't know what actually will come out from that. What motivated you to join, and what did you expect from that?
It's a good question, because I think that initiative to have something like Salv Bridge is now came where there were many different things happening, and all the banks were running and hiring new AML specialists, and so many things were ongoing, and LHV was implementing new monitoring and screening software, and so it was quite challenging to find how to say even room to think on additional initiative, which maybe wasn't very clear will it took off or not, because the same previously mentioned the issues there, that there is no clarity, can we exchange, what we can exchange, And also I was a little bit afraid that maybe banks are not very keen to exchange information. The same thing that if you find something suspicious, then you don't want to share it maybe. And I'm not so sure, but maybe the bigger banks were also thinking that maybe they are feeding other banks with information and not receiving back, and it's not beneficial. So I think it could be. I'm not saying that it was, but I think that it could be also the question for the bigger banks that should we join that initiative, because we are a lot of customers, we have a lot of information, a lot of employees, so we will potentially feed smaller banks with good information, but not getting anything back. But fortunately, all those fears didn't come true, and it was very. I was very pleased to see that since the pilot started, and actually all the banks involved, then all the 4 banks started its use right away. So there was no question, and I was very surprised that, and I'm not so sure even now why it happened, but I was quite surprised that all the banks responded very rapidly to requests. So it was question of minutes, not hours or something like that. So. To the messages there. But I think that also very important decision which was helping people to be more enthusiastic was involvement of FSA and Data Protection Inspectorate as well. So we did, how to say, mitigate the risk that we are breaching some sort of data protection or banking secrecy or tipping off topic. So I think that it helped a lot of people to welcome it open-handed, because if those people from those institutions are saying that it's okay, then it of course completely changes that picture.
Mm-hmm. And actually that was from day one we set 3 goals for the the pilot project, which was like validate if we can bring some business value for the end users, for the crime fighters. Secondly, is it legally applicable, or what is legally allowed and what is not allowed? And that's exactly one of the reasons why we involved regulators and supervisors. And thirdly, we wanted to prove that actually technically it's feasible. The data exchange is secure enough. It will be audited and approved by the bank's internal IT security teams, but also external auditors, which were brought in to validate the quality of this technology. Because when working with banks and the largest banks in Scandinavia, then their expectations are super high, probably the highest across the world in terms of being really secure, really compliant with everything. So that was the third pillar. And to deliver these kind of 3, or test and validate these kind of 3 focus areas, we involved members from different layers, from private sector, from public sector, and the AML Bridge technology was built by my own company, Salv, and we kept running steering committee meetings and working group meetings, and there was the whole information, the way how it was set up, it was really transparent and involving. That probably helped to overcome this kind of mental, psychological, competitive challenges.
Yeah, but even after involvement, all those different counterparts and also all the penetration tests and security tests there. So I still personally I had small fear that people will still not start to using that, because it is that you're basically sharing something that you at least in such extent didn't share before, and the same question that I'm sharing my information, and do I get how to say enough benefit for myself back or not? But I don't know, was it how to say good or not that the situation was that it was the same time where the cybercrime was very, very how to say, not new thing, but very, very growing thing in Estonia. And first messages which were exchanged were related to fraudulent transactions. And employees in the bank understood that it is very, very quick way and the quickest way actually to exchange information, stop the fraudulent transactions and protect their own customers. So the first messages were sent mainly related to fraud issues. And then my next question was, okay, will it now be the tool to exchange the money mule information and stop the fraud, and there will be no money laundering related messages at all? But luckily, that quite soon it changed a lot, and I don't know the latest numbers, so you could comment on that. But quite rapidly, the scale turned over, and the more money laundering related messages were exchanged, and less related to fraudulent transactions.
Mm-hmm. So it was like launched. The pilot was launched last summer, and it was closed as a success, like it was finalized as a success in the end of last year, and now it has been operational, like day-to-day use for another many months. So you saw it very closely over the 9-month period as end user yourself. Like, what were the biggest business values that your team and your area responsibility got? One was fraud, like fraud reduction. I've seen the estimates that it's like many millions of euros were saved, or like won back from the criminals. You hinted about like money laundering. I've seen also like sanction related questions moving back and forth. Like, but what were the other values that you got out from that, in addition to the reduced fraud, which is now not the biggest problem anymore here?
Yeah, the one thing was time. So definitely the investigators in the banks got those answers through Salv Bridge very rapidly. So it saved a lot of time, because you can imagine that your monitoring system will pop up different alerts every day. And if it happens like it used to happen, that even if you ask some from outer source something, it will take maybe days or maybe even weeks to get response. So it means that the case is open, and if you have done everything and you're waiting just for that response, it's just piling up different cases, and you have to come back. And if the answer eventually comes in, and but if you get the answer in minutes, then it completely changed the case investigation as well. So if you can gather all the information in very short period of time, so you can concentrate on the case and not deal many times. So you do not have to basically like reopen your mind for the case in 1 week period. So you can stick to the case and finalize the case. And also it's a time perspective also, if you need to report or file SAR on the basis of investigation to the FIU as well. So it is more complete information comparing previously when you didn't gather so much information from the other banks. And also the time between alert occurring and SAR filed is potentially reduced a lot. The same maybe days between waiting some information which is now available in minutes. It definitely gets or has quite huge value. So time is essence, especially in financial crime. And I would say that also the quality, because if the banks didn't exchange the information, then they just didn't have the information they have today. So they had to guess more, they have to estimate more, and but now you have more information. And if already other bank has also issues, or they see the problem and the response you get, it also, how to say, makes quite good case more rapidly, and you can SAR the more quality file to file more quality SAR to the FIU. So it's beneficial for the FIU as well.
So it's like I've heard also from our current FIU, head of current FIU, Mattis Mäkker, who said like they see like more like joint SAR reports, so like which are coming from multiple banks altogether, coming to their table. Again, he couldn't comment like what's the end quality of those, but at least there's richer information ends in their table. And the other way, like I've listened to the banks also saying that it helps, information exchange helps them to filter out the cases which should not be reported, and it helps to reduce the false positive SAR reports, which is actually again helping to save the time for the banks themselves, but also time for FIU to deal with the higher quality SAR reports.
And also important part here is that in many cases banks tend to hold the money before they execute the transaction finally. Is it related to potential sanction match, or is the fraudulent transactions suspicious or something like that, or even if there is serious money laundering suspicious? Also the banks in certain cases block the funds and do not allow transacting. But if with the help of the information exchange, you can actually clarify those issues, you can release the funds more rapidly. So it means also it's for the eventually honest and for honest customer, it's more frictionless banking. So nobody is happy if they try to transact and transaction is held for, I don't know, days and days maybe. So it definitely from the customer perspective also beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's spend a minute to look into the future as well. Like just imagine that there are no legal borders. There are, of course, but like these are resolvable, and then there are no like psychological problems that what if competition happens. Where do you see that this AML bridge should and could expand functionality-wise, but also geographically, or maybe institutionally as well? Like what should be the future in the next couple of years of this platform?
There are so many different layers here. So let's start from domestic perspective. So of course, all the financial institutions who transact in any way, is it payment service provider or money service business, so they should join the Salv bridge as well. So be the part of network, as you mentioned. To beat the network, you need the network. So build domestic network, and also I personally would hope that we will explore, is it usable also with the state authorities. So the FIU, maybe the information exchange in some cases with the FIU could be also on the same platform, because it is secure, it is fast, and maybe, of course, it requires changing regulations, but also the request of information from FIU could be handled through the Salv bridge as well. So just like technical platform which is there, why not to use that? And also international parts. So like working in bank, seeing that your customer is transacting with some sort of neobank in Lithuania, for example, and you see that there are transactions to that bank and from that bank. So it would be very, very useful if we could have the same platform to obtaining and exchanging information with the other counterparts, and not only. I'm already going beyond. So the first step would be very beneficial to exchange information between the banks, but also to include other financial institutions as well, because I can imagine that the Revolut maybe is bigger than some banks already, and I know many Estonians are using their services, also N26 and many others.
I know that many representatives in different countries and different institutions around the world are listening to our discussion. What can you recommend them when they have actually they have intention and wish to launch something similar, but they don't know where to start, or they have some worries that they cannot resolve, or they're very slow. Like, how could you recommend, you as a former head of FIU, former head of AML in the bank, like one of the authors of the successful data intelligence sharing initiative, who has gone through this whole cycle really successfully? What can you recommend them, like how they can start?
It's very easy. Copy us. So I think that we didn't make any serious mistakes towards or through that process. So first thing is analyze. So include legal specialists. So, but be, how to say, careful that lawyers can give different answers. It depends how you ask them. So be very clear what's your initiative, and involve open-minded lawyers. But even more important is that involve your regulators, and not only regulators but supervisors as well. Of course, it's maybe it's not so easy, but I would presume that every supervisor in AML area in every EU country is willing to help banks to improve their information exchange. I would be very, very surprised if there will be any supervisor coming out and saying that no, you can't exchange information. So the question is that I hope that current situation is that everybody is supporting information exchange. The question is, if there are obstacles identified, then the next question is how to overcome those obstacles. Because I'm quite sure, I'm very optimistic on that, there is will that banks and other financial institutions should exchange information. So, and the question is to analyze, can we do that? Then the next question is, if we can't, what is needed to be changed? And I'm quite sure that there will be support of those changes. And then third thing is the technical solution. So of course there is Salv already there, so there is no need to build their own. But basically there is decision of what kind of technical solutions to use. Because also in Estonia, some people said, oh, we have secure emails, why we don't send secure emails? But let's be honest, you need to have specific tools which is convenient. It doesn't disrupt your everyday work. It doesn't take much time to use, and you have all the audit trail already within that system. So yeah, that's my idea. Is my idea.
Okay, one key to success is that there are many different things and processes that need many reasons why data should be exchanged between institutions. And there are many use cases. Like when we started the project, we listed down 15 different use cases around fraud, politically exposed persons, sanctions, group level data sharing, array lists, you name it. And of course, it was way too much to launch everything all together. So we filtered out the ones which were the most important at this time. And we changed it, like priority list quite many times, until we got to the point where that Aivar mentioned that actually we started with the cyber fraud use case, which was dealing with the customers' money which was stolen. Again, we can debate, is it money laundering or not? But the problem is that it was a huge problem for Estonian banks, and that's what was the reason why they focused on this specific use case. And then additional use cases got added over the time, and we still keep adding. In your country, in your community, the starting use case might be something different, but that's the best startup advice I can give you, is like just start small, test if it works, then iteratively add more use cases and grow the use of the product. Don't try to go out with a too large thing, because it will take years and years and success is not guaranteed. Just to end up, thank you everyone who was following and listening us and thinking along. It is a complex topic, but it's doable. I hope that we proved and demonstrated you that we didn't do any miracles. It was like logical work process. If you're interested to launch something similar in your community, country, region, just please contact us. Doesn't matter if you're a large bank, fintech, industry, union, regulator, supervisor. We're super open to share our knowledge and experience and contacts, both from the technology level, from the banking level, from the regulator side, because our mission is to beat financial crime, and we know that this cannot be done alone, or it cannot be done by one region or one small group of companies. So please contact us, and I'm super happy to share all the knowledge that we have gathered and help you to progress. And secondly, we have published a white paper about like pilot case study we ran last year and how it converted into the real use. And we have published this white paper, which we keep updating regularly with the newest results. And based on this white paper and our work also, there is a teaser that will be soon, or there is already published, Financial Action Task Force research paper, which is covering also the Estonian AML Bridge as one of the most successful use cases in the world. So please have a read that as well. Thank you.